Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we have Bethany Hubert from Going Merry, which is an amazing scholarship search engine that's only been around for a few years. And we had Bethany present last year. And she not only is an expert about Going Merry, but sort of all things financial aid. And as colleges are approaching 80, 90,000. We all, no matter how much money we have, we all need some help with financial aid for our education. So I am going to turn this over to Bethany. Thank you so much for being here today, and the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Bethany, and I am the Financial Aid Education Coordinator at Going Merry. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly so you have something to look at other than my face. Basically, what we're going to do here today is actually go over everything financial aid. And I'm so grateful that this is being recorded, so anyone not able to attend or that might have technical difficulties can always reference back to this and watch it back. My one request is that if you do have a question while I'm going through this, please drop it in the chat. Everyone hopping off of mute at the same time can sometimes cause some hiccups. So if you have a question while I'm going through it, definitely drop it in the chat. I will circle back to the top of the chat at the end just to make sure we answer all of your questions and take care of all of those concerns. A bit about Going Merry. If you've never heard of us, we are a completely free financial aid application platform. We have some really incredible tools for schools to use, but for parents and students, we have a lot of really great education and financial aid opportunities, trying to make it easier for students to find those opportunities and apply to them. And for parents, helping you find those opportunities for your students. This past year, we actually launched our parent portal. So now you can log in and find those opportunities for your student, help them as well. So if you don't have an account, I would really encourage you to go ahead and make one because it'll really help you find those financial aid opportunities. Now, I'm going to do my best to take off my Going Merry hat throughout this presentation, but I probably will pipe in and kind of point out some specific features that we have that make it a little bit easier to kind of apply this stuff that I'm going to cover. And there's a lot of information. So again, if you have a question, drop it in the chat. I will make sure to circle back. The first thing I like to kind of define here is, what is financial aid? When I talk to families every day, what I find is that there's oftentimes this misunderstanding about what financial aid is and isn't. Really simply, though, it's any money to help you pay for college. It doesn't matter if it's a check from your aunt, if it's a grant like the Pell Grant, or if it's a student loan, all of that is considered financial aid. Now, what I like to do is break it down into two core categories there: gift aid and loans, or the type of money you don't have to repay and the type of aid you do have to repay. So the types of financial aid that you can receive that you'll never have to repay are going to be those grants and scholarships, work-study programs, anything like that. On the other side, aid that you are going to have to repay is going to be things like student loans. Now, oftentimes when you receive those financial aid award letters, families are pretty shocked because they received a bunch of student loans on it, and they're like, why didn't the school give me any aid? In the eyes of the government and in the eyes of the school, they did extend you financial aid. So just be prepared for that if you're not aware that student loans are considered part of that package. Now, what I want to talk about here, and when we're going through this entire presentation, is what type of aid do you want to leverage? And with the type of aid that you end up leveraging, what kind of burden might that place on you as a student or your parents in the future? How difficult is it going to be to repay those loans? And how do we minimize reliance on student loans so that your cost of college is going to be a good return on investment? Now, I am going to cover a lot of specific terminology as I'm going through here. I'll actually just go ahead and drop a glossary that we have so you can reference it if that's at all helpful. But I'll also make sure that your counselors get this as well. So you can go back and read through it if I kind of gloss over a term and you need more information on it. The next thing I want to kind of define is, what should you do when? Now, when I talk to students, I find that oftentimes they don't start until senior year. And you really ideally want to start the process of finding, applying, learning about student financial aid before senior year. It's really important to try and do that. And the reason why is because when you read those stories about the students that won $500,000 in scholarships, how did they do that? And you read about it, you discover that they started applying to scholarships in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade. And they've applied to so many scholarships before everyone else was looking that they won a bunch of them. So it's really, really important to start that process as early as possible. So if you're a student and you're not a senior, start applying to scholarships as early as possible. It's also really important to explore all post-secondary options for your career. Not every career needs to go get a big 4-year degree from a big 4-year school. Sometimes you can go get an associate's, or sometimes you can go get an apprenticeship, whatever it might be. Know what all of your options are to achieve your career goals. Another big one is, it's really important that students and parents have conversations about any savings that they might have. If your parents have a 529 plan, that's really important to understand. And if they don't, that's also really important to understand. What we find is that oftentimes that conversation doesn't happen, and a lot of assumptions are made from the student and from the parent, and that's not a good thing. When everyone's on the right page and everyone's on the same page, it's really helpful for making sure that the student prioritizes finding financial aid and maximizes the amount of aid they apply to. Another big one is thinking about college as a return on investment. A lot of times students have this list of schools they want to go to, and they are so excited because they got in, and they aren't thinking about, hey, if I'm borrowing this much money, does it ultimately actually benefit me to go to this more expensive school? Sometimes what you'll find is that you're spending so much money on student loans or paying it out of pocket that you actually have a worse return on your investment than the lower cost school. We're going to talk about that more later, but that's a really important thing to understand and to look at whenever you're comparing your schools. Another thing you really want to do is create a cost-conscious college list. A lot of times cost is the last thing that the student looks at, and that's a big mistake. And so what I like to tell students to do is to first rank your top choice schools by cost, and then make sure you've got a range of costs on that list. If you want to go to these really expensive schools, absolutely apply, go for it, but make sure you have some lower cost schools just in case your budget changes or anything happens financially where you need to have a lower cost school that you are accepted to so that you can attend college. Now, once you get into senior year, that's where it gets into crunch time, of course. The first priority is the FAFSA, and I will get on my soapbox in just a little bit, so I won't do it here, but know that completing the FAFSA is your top priority in senior year. The next one is applying to scholarships. If you're a senior and you haven't started applying to scholarships yet, you need to do that today. A lot of times students wait until January of their senior year to start applying, and that's a really big mistake because there are scholarships available to you all throughout the school year. And if you can start applying to those before everyone else starts looking, you might have a better chance of winning those scholarships. Another one is connecting with your top choice schools. Talking to the financial aid office and the admissions office can sometimes clue you into financial aid opportunities that you weren't aware of. Maybe they can let you know about a deadline that you didn't know about, or they can tell you about a scholarship opportunity for a department that you're interested in. Being connected at the school, even a little bit, can really help you find more financial aid. Another big one is have transparent conversations about student loans and the potential need for it. I find that students and parents do not talk about this. And what happens is they get all the way into June and July before they start entering college in the fall, and then everyone's panicking and all upset and stressed out, and they are trying to figure out all the information in 2 or 3 weeks when they could have been looking at it and having a transparent conversation earlier in the process. So although we don't want you to use student loans if you can avoid them, it is really important that everyone's on the same page and understands that a student loan might be needed for whatever school you're looking at. And the last one is appeals. Most students I talk to don't realize that you can actually appeal to your top choice school and ask them for more money after you receive that award letter. So if you receive a disappointing award letter, always ask for more. You do have that ability, and it is a really important step. Now, basically, everything I just said, this is kind of a visual representation of how we show you that on Going Mary. Every time a senior logs in or a parent of a senior logs in, we like to give you this reminder of what the right order of operations is. Obviously, FAFSA, state aid applications, and scholarships are your top priorities, and those need to be completed first. After you understand how much gift aid you might receive from a school, that is when you select the school. Oftentimes I talk to students and they've chosen the school first without knowing how much aid they'll receive, and then they commit to the school before understanding what that ultimate cost is going to be. So instead, it's really important to understand the gift aid first and then choose the school. I oftentimes also see that students and parents will start looking at student loans before they do the appeals process. Don't do that. If you have a financial gap at a school, ask for more money first, and then as a last resort, educate yourself about student loans, compare those options, and give yourself enough time that if you're going to have to take out a student loan, you can understand what the best fit was for your family. Now, I warned you I was going to get on my soapbox about the FAFSA. Here's where I'm going to do that. the first thing I want to stress is it's incredibly important to complete the FAFSA, but there are some really big changes coming to it this year, and your college counselors are probably going to be cluing you into that throughout the year. Those changes aren't fully finalized yet, and so be prepared and on the lookout for that communication from your counselor. Some of those big changes that are coming are actually that they're going to move back the open date. The last few years it's been on October 1st. This year they're telling us it's going to open as early as December 1st. It could get pushed back further. It could technically move up. But until that open date is fully published and announced and ready to go, be on the lookout for it, because as soon as it opens, you want to apply. Other changes coming are how they calculate income. And they're also going to move away from the EFC, or the expected family contribution, over to the SAI, or the student aid index. Now, those two things serve the same purpose. They essentially tell the school what your family can afford for college, to pay for your students' college education. And that's how the school is going to calculate your financial need at that school. But it's really important to understand that that formula is changing. The biggest thing I want to flag here is that if you do have another student already in college, the biggest change is going to be how they calculate that. They're not going to be offering a credit on your EFC or your SAI to lower that number if you have multiple children in college. And so for some families, you might see a higher SAI than you saw for your child's EFC. And so just be prepared for that. I'm sure your counselors will be telling you more information as more information comes out about it. But really just stay on top of any communication from your counselor, because those changes are coming. Now, the FAFSA essentially is designed to show the school how much your financial need is, and it determines how much federal, state, and institutional aid you can receive in many cases. Now, you do want to complete it as early as possible, and so you don't miss out on any college-specific or state-specific deadlines. And it's also really important to understand that sometimes aid runs out, and so some schools will work on a first-come, first-served basis, and so the earlier you complete it, the better. Now, if you think, hey, we make so much money, we won't qualify for the Pell Grant, so why do we need to complete the FAFSA? The reality is that the FAFSA opens the door for all types of financial aid, even merit-based scholarships, even student loans, institutional grants, state scholarships, all of that, the FAFSA can open the door to. And for students that don't qualify to complete the FAFSA, in Maryland, there's actually the Maryland State Financial Aid application that you can complete instead. That way you can still be eligible for state or institutional aid, but it is incredibly important. It's not just for the Pell Grant. It is really, really important to understand that if you don't complete the FAFSA, the school has to assume you can cover the entire cost of attendance. The reason why that happens is because a school determines how much need you have, and then they determine how much financial aid they'll extend to you. And so if you don't have an SAI, or student aid index, next year, then the school can't calculate that. And the way the school is going to calculate it is by cost of attendance minus your SAI. So even if you have a really large student aid index, you're still possibly going to qualify as having financial need at the given school. So I like to use the example of if the school is $50,000 and you have an SAI of $20,000, the school is going to see that you have a financial need of $30,000 and then award aid based on that. And so that's really important to understand. I see a lot of questions coming back in here as well. I do see one question. I'll go ahead and answer it. It's going to be 2 years prior. So I always mess up the math the way that works, but basically from the year your student was a sophomore is how it kind of works out. They're going to use those tax documents. And so if your income has changed, or your financial circumstances have changed since then, you'll file your FAFSA, it'll determine your EFC, and then your SAI, sorry, still getting used to the change. And then what's going to happen is you'll probably have to write an appeal to the school and explain to them, hey, I was laid off. Hey, I am a freelance artist and my income this year was quite different. And they'll be able to make what's called a professional judgment based on that circumstance. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about here, it kind of shifting gears pretty quickly, is scholarship strategies, because that's kind of another part that a lot of students and parents get really interested in. And what I've done here is given some strategies specifically, and then kind of how you can apply those strategies. So the big strategies I want you to think about are choosing better odds, or finding those scholarship applications that are going to receive fewer applicants. The more the merrier. There is not enough scholarships you can apply to. There just isn't. 40 is great, 100 is better, 150 is even better. The more scholarships you can apply to, the absolute better, because you'll have better chances of winning some. The next one is learn about financial aid. We find that when students and parents understand financial aid earlier in the process, they prioritize scholarships more and they apply to them earlier, and they also continue to apply to them later on as well. Another big one is choosing an affordable college. A lot of times students will choose a college because they really want to go there and they're not thinking about the cost. And then they realize that there's such a big financial gap to go there that they get really discouraged. And so we don't really want to see that. And so the best thing you can do is actually have a range of costs. If you really want to go to this prestigious, more expensive school, try and find some options that are also lower cost and going to be a little bit less expensive, so that you feel like you have something that's attainable as well. And the last strategy is thoroughly completing and updating your Going Merry profile. The way Going Merry works is we match scholarships to students, we match financial aid opportunities to students. And so when you have your Going Merry profile up to date, we're able to show you all of those opportunities and make it easier for you to find them. So how do we apply those strategies? Well, the first one is local scholarships. And luckily, Montgomery County has some really incredible local scholarships. They even start all the way back in 9th grade for some of them. So it's really important to make sure you prioritize those scholarships first. And you should be applying to them. Pay attention to anything you get from your counselor saying, hey, we've got these local scholarships. Those scholarships are the ones you have the best chance of winning. The big national scholarships can receive so many applications that it's really competitive and hard to win. So focusing on local scholarships is a big thing you can do. Another one is institutional scholarships, or looking at the college you want to attend. So I actually talked to a parent over the summer asking me a question about, hey, how do I find accounting scholarships for my student? And I explained, well, what you want to do is go look up the business department at your student's top choice school. I think in this case, they wanted to go to Florida or something, but let's use Alabama because I'm a Bama grad, so I know that that is Culver House School of Business. So if I wanted to find an accounting major as a freshman, what I would do is search Culver House School of Business scholarships for freshmen. You don't want to use accounting because oftentimes those terms will be for master's degree and higher graduate degree programs. So if you use general business school scholarships, you'll find more opportunities. And again, fewer people can apply to them because fewer people are going to that school, focusing on that major, and even looking for scholarships from the school. So make sure you prioritize those as well. Another big one is small awards and essay scholarships. Oftentimes students overlook these either because they don't feel confident in their writing skills, or they feel like the small award scholarships are just kind of a waste of time, and so they don't focus on them. But if you can focus on those scholarships, you'll find that there are fewer people applying and you do have a really good chance of winning them. And the last one is just starting early and keep going. When I talk to most students, they apply January to March of senior year. That's the only time they look at scholarships. Big mistake. You want to start as early as possible in the process, all the way back in the 8th grade, even if you can. And you want to apply all the way through your college career. What you'll find is, again, on those department scholarship pages, that there are scholarships for sophomore business majors at Alabama, or junior scholarships for business majors at Alabama. And so you want to look at those scholarships and continue to apply to them because it can really reduce the reliance on student loans. Another big one is what we call magic on Going Merry. We sort scholarships by the best match and the next upcoming due date to the top so students know what to prioritize. But we also vet every single scholarship so there's no scams. We autofill fields any chance that we can with information that's already in your Going Merry profile. And we match the scholarship to you. So you might log in and see, we found 100 scholarships worth $500,000 just for you. And those scholarships you can confidently move forward and go, I filled out my profile, I know these are real, and I know that I qualify for them, so I can just apply. And it really speeds up the process. What we find is that students that use Going Merry to apply to scholarships apply to 8 times the national average of scholarships, just because it's so much more efficient. So I always recommend trying Going Merry for scholarships. That said, we aren't the only scholarship platform out there. And although I am a fair bit biased thinking we do it the best, because we have the largest database of scholarships and everything is vetted, and we've got national, local, and institutional scholarships on there, it is important to look elsewhere as well, because sometimes a scholarship provider will only list their scholarship on one platform. So it's really important to make sure you double check those, especially your college's website, especially the local scholarship page for Montgomery County, and checking those big other names like scholarships.com or FastWeb. Shifting gears to the next topic, and I know this is probably like drinking through a fire hose, so I do apologize, and I see lots of questions coming in, so I will make sure to get to those. Picking the right college. The reality is that picking the right college makes a massive difference in the ability to afford college and being saddled with unnecessary debt. So what I'm going to do in just a second is actually play a video of how we help you compare financial aid award letters so that you can figure out what school has the best return on investment based on the offers that you received. But some steps that you want to keep in mind first are making a budget. A lot of times students don't start here because they don't know what their budget should be for going to college. And so having those conversations with your parents can really help with that process. Another one is make sure that if you're applying to a lot of out-of-state schools, you do also consider some in-state schools. A lot of states will offer grants and stuff for students that graduated from a school in their state and attend a college in their state. And so if you apply to that in-state school and you get in, you'll oftentimes find that you receive a lot more aid, and the cost of attendance is really much more affordable, one, for in-state tuition, and then two, because you receive so much more aid for in-state schools. Another big one is, again, like I mentioned earlier, applying to multiple schools that have different costs, right? Like on the cost of attendance range. So if you want to go to a really expensive school above what your budget is, make sure that you're applying to schools that are kind of in the sweet spot of your budget, and then also that are going to save you a lot of money and that are a lot lower cost as well. So you have a range to choose from. It's also really important to understand that if you are planning to apply early decision, that you understand how that might impact your financial aid opportunities, and that you're comfortable with paying 100% of the cost of attendance. Although applying early decision doesn't mean that you're going to miss out on more financial aid, it can sometimes mean that the school prioritizes giving financial aid to those students that have applied regular decision and haven't committed yet. And we also see this when it comes to the appeals process as well. The students that haven't committed yet to the school, haven't said, hey, I'm definitely coming here, those students have a better chance of having their appeal granted because they haven't committed and the school is still trying to get them to come over to them. So it's really important to understand that applying early decision can sometimes negatively impact your ability to receive financial aid. It can impact your ability to appeal. And it also means that you're locked into the school. And so if you end up realizing, hey, this school is way out of my budget, there's no way I can pay 100% of cost of attendance, and they offer me no aid, that you realize that you're going to have to potentially wait a year because that's the only school that you've applied to at that point. So be aware of that. And if you need help with that, or if you have more questions about that, I can go more in depth in it. Just drop a question in the chat. But it's a really big thing that I'm finding a lot of students don't realize until later on, and it's a really important consideration. Another big one is comparing cost of attendance information early on, and make sure that you're looking at apples to apples comparisons. So some cost of attendance estimates will only include 12 credit hours, whereas others will include 15 credit hour estimates. And tuition is billed hourly. So if you're looking at a 12-hour estimate and it looks a lot less expensive than a 15 credit hour estimate, it could be because that school is just less expensive, or it could be because they're using a 12-hour estimate instead. And so that's a really important thing to understand. You also want to make sure you're keeping an eye on if they include indirect costs inside of that cost of attendance estimate. Indirect costs is going to be things like books and fees, transportation costs and stuff like that. Some schools include that in their cost of attendance information, others don't. So again, just make sure you've got an apples to apples comparison. It's also really important to compare award letters, compare those financial gaps at different schools, and compare future outcomes like average monthly income for graduates from the school and total lifetime earnings on average for students that graduate from there, minus any kind of student loans that you might be borrowing. So I know that's a lot of information. I'm actually going to go ahead and play this video so I can take a sip of water really fast. And then I will circle back and kind of tie up all the loose ends, and I'll see if I've got any questions I need to clear up really quick as well. So.
What we're going to focus on is how they make sure that they choose the right college too, by comparing the different financial aid offers they get. So I'm going to click onto this to show you how that works. Now, look, the first thing, as I said, is that it's really complicated for students to understand all of the different terms used in financial aid award letters. And sometimes it feels a little bit like the colleges do that on purpose. You'll see on this first page of our tool is we sympathize with students. We acknowledge that it's difficult for them to understand it. And reference this kind of incredible study that was done 4 years ago that found that there were 136 different terms used to describe the same type of federal loan. It becomes impossible for students to truly understand it. So we give them that bit of context to help get them started, make sure they feel heard and supported. And then what we do is ask them to fill out the information from their award letters. We've used these two universities. We have no links or anything to the universities, but I want to show you a live example. So what the student will do with their first college is input all of the costs that they have in the award letter, the grants and scholarships that they've been awarded in it. They'll input to their work study. And then finally, of course, the different loans that they've been offered to. Once they've done that for each of the colleges they're considering, we'll come through and actually ask them what their family contribution is going to be. And in particular, what the real family contribution, there's always a lot of frustration about the expected family contribution being way off. So we just ask, what can your family afford to contribute? And based on that, we'll crunch the numbers and come up with 3 recommendations for your students. The first is about how they maximize their long-term wealth. You can see it up at the top here. The second is then about how they minimize their student loan debt. And the third is about how they minimize their costs. Now, we recommend this top one, but we know other families have different priorities. So we want to give students these 3 different recommendations. Scrolling down, we make it really easy to understand how they're different and help families choose which one is most relevant to them. There's a quick, easy 2-minute video that is perfect for the attention span of your students to explain how everything works. But most importantly, if you keep scrolling, is this standardized financial aid award letter for each college. So it takes all these complicated terms and just spits out really standard, clear answers for students, like showing them their net cost and how that differs between each college, and then also the financial gap that they have for each college. And so suddenly, from all these complicated different letters, you have a really clear idea of exactly what each college is going to mean in terms of your costs. Scrolling down, we also want to give students a sense of what their future looks like. If they decide to go to that college, what will that mean for them in terms of their future salary, for example? And so again, for each college, we show them their expected future salary and their expected future loan payments. And a really important thing here is we show them what percentage of their future salary is likely to be spent on loans. What you can see is that Bowdoin, despite the fact we saw earlier that it was this higher financial gap and higher net cost, because it has that higher monthly salary, it ends up being a lower percentage of future salary that's getting spent on loans. You can also see that by looking at the student's long-term future. So we show over time, and again, this is using data that comes from the US Department of Education. We show them what their total earnings will be over the next 20 years after their graduation, as well as how much will be spent on loans and interest, and give them a really clear way of understanding which will help them maximize their total earnings after loans. Again, we talk about other concepts for them, like acceptable levels of student debt, but like with everything we do on Going Merry, we make it really clear and easy for the student to understand so that they make the right decision when it comes to paying for college. I'll wrap up there. Thanks so much for watching, and we're looking forward to helping your students maximize their financial aid and then make the right decision when it comes to which college to. Thanks.
So I hope that makes a lot of sense and kind of clears up why it's so important not to just read your financial aid award letters, but also compare them against each other and look at those future outcomes and understand, does it actually make sense in terms of how much I'm going to have to pay to go to this school? Does it ultimately make financial sense? Is it a good return on investment? Now, I did see one question that I think is a really good one to address here, as I was just talking about early decision and how it impacts financial aid. But Sarah asked, if the FAFSA doesn't open until December this year and early decisions come out in December, how will students know if they can afford it if those financial aid packages aren't ready yet? The reality is that that's always been a problem. When you apply early decision, you're saying, if you accept me to this school, then I commit to go here and I will decline any other acceptance and I will withdraw all of my other applications. That's before financial aid award packages come out, because those award packages come out in February to March, sometimes even April, but generally they don't come out before December. And so you've now committed to this school simply by applying to it and getting accepted. You have no idea if you're going to receive financial aid yet. And that is kind of like going in blind. So if you don't think that you can cover 100% of that cost of attendance, then sometimes it's not the best decision to apply early decision. The challenge is that some schools accept 95 or 99% of their students in early decision. So if you want to go there, you have to apply early decision. It's a really sticky position to kind of be in as a student. But unfortunately, if you do apply early decision, you are accepting that and committing to that school before you know how much aid they're going to offer you. And so what I would recommend is looking up the current cost of attendance at that given school, deciding if that is within your budget, if that is something you would be comfortable paying out of pocket for. And then also look at what their acceptance rates are, depending on if you apply early decision versus regular decision, see how that breakdown is. Like I mentioned, some schools are kind of more in the 50-50 range, and some schools are in the 99% are accepted early decision. And so very few students get in if they don't apply that way. And so that's a really important thing to understand and to be prepared for, because you do lose some negotiation ability, because those schools will maybe want to entice those other students that haven't committed to them yet to come over. And so
I guess I just said, like, I meet with some like Ivy League reps, and I do ask them, and they say they are very conscious of making sure the packages do align with their finances. And I have had a student that said he felt like the finances didn't align, and he did get out of the early decision. So I think they are kind of doing their homework, because they don't want to accept a lot of people, because you can get out of it if the finances don't line up. I mean, a lot of schools had FAFSA deadlines of December 1, so it was a lot earlier. So it's going to be a lot different, I think, in all ways this year. But
yeah, absolutely. This year's going to be a little bit of a mess in terms of when all those deadlines and things kind of overlap, and especially with the FAFSA not opening until quite a bit later this year. A lot of schools that are Ivy League especially say that they will cover 100% of financial need without student loans. Some say we'll cover 100% of financial need, including with student loans. And so sometimes if you've got a school that has a promise to cover 100% of financial need, you're going to be okay either way. Other schools will have that early decision process, and they don't have those financial need promises as well. And that's where it's really tricky. And so my advice is always look and see if you're comfortable with paying that cost of attendance completely out of pocket or most of it out of pocket. And if you're not, take a step back and see how many of those people who apply regular decision get in, to see if you've got still some pretty good odds. That way you might have a better chance of receiving financial aid. The hard thing with early decision, and why the data is such a mess in determining if students are kind of penalized in terms of financial aid if they apply early decision, is because a lot of the students that do apply early decision do have a lower financial need. They make more money. They have a much higher EFC or next year SAI. And so they qualify for less financial aid. So it's kind of a sticky situation where we can see that clearly students receive less aid if they apply early decision, but part of that is conflated with the fact that they also have a higher net worth family. So it's kind of a mess, but we do see that a lot of students that have already committed to the school have a harder time appealing. And so it's just something to be aware of as a family if that's something you're going to do. Hope that makes sense. Shifting gears, talking about appeals, I guess, since we were kind of already on the subject. Yeah.
What we're going to focus on is how they
work for me. There it goes. The appeals process. So I've mentioned it a few times, but the appeals process is a way that you can actually negotiate with the school and ask them for more money if you received a financial aid award and you're a little bit disappointed by it. Now, the caveat with this is that if you don't complete the FAFSA, most, if not all schools now will say you do not qualify to submit an appeal. So if you want to have that ability to file an appeal, you need to complete the FAFSA. Now, there are a lot of reasons why you can write an appeal. It can just be because you're disappointed with the award letter for some reason, or it could be because maybe you got waitlisted and they didn't extend you enough aid. Maybe you received a better offer from another school, or maybe your financial circumstances have changed since your FAFSA uses tax documents from 2 years ago. And those are all really important reasons. And especially, I saw someone ask earlier, they have multiple children in college and that's not going to be factored into their SAI this next upcoming year. yeah, the best thing you can do is file an appeal for that. And a lot of schools will probably consider making a professional judgment to lower your SAI and consider you to have a higher financial need for your student. Now, professional judgments are at the discretion of the school. And so there's a lot this year that we don't know because this is a new process and it's a new formula. But the assumption and the hope is that schools will take that into consideration and will factor it in into their professional judgments really as much as possible, because there are a lot of families that have made budgets and made assumptions based on the EFC, and that's now all of a sudden not the way it's calculated anymore. If you do want to file an appeal, some tips for that process are to keep it to one page as much as possible and write that letter to a specific person. Reach out to the financial aid office, find out who that person is, find out if they have any kind of forms or processes you have to complete first, and also find out what their deadlines are, because oftentimes the ones posted online are actually inaccurate, we find. We also see that students have a higher likelihood of getting their financial aid award letter accepted if they submit it before May 1st, which is National Decision Day. That's the day that every student has to commit to going to a school, they pay their deposit, all that kind of good stuff. So we find that more students receive favorable of financial aid appeal decisions if they submit it before May 1st. So if you receive that financial aid award letter, you're disappointed about it, get it submitted as early as possible so that the school can understand that they need to give you a better offer. A big thing to think about too is that if you're going to submit a financial aid appeal, you want to make sure that you have specific numbers and you have documentation, because sometimes the schools will ask you for it. So if you're going to explain, hey, our financial circumstances changed, my dad was laid off this past year, and so now our family's income is much, much lower than what it was a few years ago, they can actually take that into account, but they might want to see documentation that that is true. Or they might, if you're saying, hey, I received a better offer from this other school, they might want to see that financial aid award letter to make sure that you're telling the truth. Another big thing is that if you're going to file an appeal, make sure you only submit it to one, maybe two top choice schools. Don't submit it to every school you were accepted to, because that reflects poorly on you, because you're basically, they're going to feel like shopping around. And so if you appeal, make sure you keep it to one, maybe two schools at the most. Don't appeal to everybody, because those schools will confirm information with each other sometimes, and it can reflect poorly on you. Going Mary does have a really great appeal letter template that we saw a lot of success with this past year, helping students write their financial aid appeals. So if you do need help with that, we've got a really incredible appeal letter template inside of that College Cost Insights tool on our platform. The next thing we're going to talk about is student loans. And like I mentioned earlier, student loans is the last step of the process. It's not something you should consider until you understand all of the amounts of gift aid that you're going to receive, and you've completed an appeal if you've got a financial gap still. We give you that list of priorities, and we say that it's last because it should be the last step. Now, it's never too early to learn about student loans to make sure if you're going to need one, you understand what you need to know about them, but you shouldn't be applying to student loans until after you've exhausted all other financial aid options. Now, that said, there's no shame in needing a student loan. The vast majority of students do need them nowadays. The cost of college has risen exponentially, and the amount of aid that's out there has not increased at the same rate. So we are seeing more and more students needing a student loan, at least in 1 year of their college career, to be able to afford college. So know that there is no shame. That said, you need to minimize the reliance on them as much as you possibly can, and only take out student loans if you need them, and only take out what you need. Don't take out extra. A big part of that is making sure that if you're going to need a student loan, you do complete the FAFSA, because that does open the door to federal student loans, which can sometimes have some really good advantages. So if there's even a tiny chance that you're going to need a student loan, be sure to complete it. Some other things you can do to minimize student loans are to pick an affordable college, only take out what you need, and continue to apply to scholarships while you are in college. A lot of times students don't realize that they can do that and that they should be doing it, and that then their sophomore, junior, or senior year, they see a higher reliance on student loans. So continuing to apply to scholarships while you're in college can reduce that reliance. Now, when it comes to student loans, there's kind of two core categories, and then there's some little subcategories there. There's federal student loans and there's private student loans. With federal student loans, they're subsidized and unsubsidized, and then parent plus loans. With subsidized and unsubsidized, they're quite similar, with the big differences being that subsidized loans do not accumulate any interest while your student is in school, and that you can only receive subsidized loans if you have a financial need at that school. So sometimes you'll see that one school offers you a subsidized loan and another one doesn't. And that might be because you have a financial need at one school and not another, or your financial need at one school is substantially greater than at another school. So it's a really important thing to understand. Now, with subsidized and unsubsidized, you're generally going to find that they have the best interest rates. They're going to have lower and fixed interest rates to make them easier to repay. And with these two types of loans, you do not have to repay them until after graduation. Now, the challenge there is that waiting and what's called deferring the payment until after graduation can mean that you accumulate more interest, especially with those unsubsidized loans. So it's generally never recommended to defer payments if you can avoid it. Always make a small payment to try and bring down that principal balance and to reduce the amount of interest you accrue. Another big one is that the loan amounts vary by year and they increase as you get into college. Last year, the amounts were $5,500 and only $3,500 could be subsidized. So next year, I think it's going to be close to the same. I need to double check it because it changes every year. But you are not eligible if you do not complete the FAFSA. Plus loans are going to be for parents or for independent students, and they're designed to make up a financial gap. And that gap is going to be cost of attendance minus the amount of other aid received. Now, unlike the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, these are going to require things like credit checks, origination. They're going to have repayment beginning once the loan is dispersed, though you do have the option to defer these as well, but interest is going to accrue. With federal student loans, though, even with plus loans, those providers are oftentimes going to work with you, and it can be really helpful, especially if you need an income-driven repayment plan. They're going to be a little bit more flexible with you. There are two things to consider with plus loans, though. The first one, they are based on market rates for interest rates. So oftentimes families find that they have better rates on the private market going with the private student loan provider. For some families, it's not a difference. And in that case, obviously go with the federal plus loan. But for some families, they'll find that they have a substantially lower rate from a private student loan lender, and that's something you might need to consider. Another thing is that with parent plus loans, they are written in the parent's name. They are paid in full in the parent's name. They can never be transferred to your student's name. And so if you are not comfortable with that as a parent, and many parents I talk to are not, that is something to be aware of. I know a lot of parents get really frustrated because they don't know that. And so I like to be really transparent that that is a thing. Now, with private student loans, these are going to vary quite a bit depending on the lender, interest rates, what they're going to look at in terms of what they're going to consider to borrow, to create your interest rate and stuff like that. Repayment terms, all of that's going to vary depending on the lender. And those lenders could be credit unions, they could be private banks, they could be private companies. Really, a lot of different places offer those private student loans. Now, virtually all are going to require a cosigner, but there are some that are parent-only loans, and then there are student loans that will have the student as the primary and then the parent as the cosigner. All of them are going to require a credit check, and they're going to look at things like your credit score, borrowing history, cosigner data, and how much you're wanting to borrow, and that's how they're going to set your rate. There are some companies like Earnest that will actually rate match you, and they'll offer things like 9 months deferment until after graduation, though those loans will still continue to accrue interest, and so it's never recommended because you'll accrue more interest. But there are features like that, so I always recommend doing a lot of research if you're considering a private student loan. Look at things like their Trustpilot reviews to understand the customer experience. Call into customer service and see how long you wait on hold. Look up interest rates, look up features like deferment, and if you can drop off as a parent and make your student on the loan all by themselves. There's different features, and they're all going to vary depending on those private student loan provider. So make sure you do a lot of research if that's something you're going to have to get into. Now, I know that's a lot of information. And so usually the next question, I've already seen it in the chat, is how do I make a Going Merry account? So I've got 2 QR codes here. I'll also just go ahead and drop the links in here as well. If you would like to make a Going Merry account, I do recommend that if you're a student, you have an account, and if you are a parent, you also have an account. And the reason for that is just because you can help your student find financial aid and also hold them accountable to make sure they do apply. You'll be able to see a lot of information to make sure. And we've also got some really great parent tools for budgeting and for figuring out how to cover all those costs while your student is in college. At this time, I'm going to scroll to the top to answer those questions really quickly. But if you have a question, feel free to come off of mute anytime and ask it out loud. I'll also answer those as well.
I have one, Bethany. So all of these, like and I did put this in the chat as well, but is there anything you have to pay for on Going Mary, or are all of these things that you've shown us today free?
Everything is free. It's free for the school to use, the tools for the school. It's free for scholarship providers, if they're listing like a local scholarship program. And it's also free for the parents and the students to use all of the features on Going Mary.
Wonderful. Great resource. Thank you.
Yes. Let's see. Yes, 2021. Thank you for that. Because I was like, I always try and do the math of what tax year they're going to be looking at this year, and I always mess it up for some reason. Let's see. Should we complete the FAFSA and the Maryland State Financial Aid application? The Maryland State Financial Aid application is for students that do not qualify to fill out the FAFSA. So if you can complete the FAFSA, that automatically makes you qualify for any Maryland State aid. The reason why the Maryland State Aid application is there is because there are students like DACA students that do not qualify to complete the FAFSA. And so the Maryland State Aid application is there so that those students can still receive some state aid or institutional aid by filling out that form. So if you are not in that situation, then you just need to complete the FAFSA and you're good to go. And you want to do it as early as possible. Yes, Pam, having 4 children in college next year, they are not going to factor it in whenever you complete your SAI or your FAFSA. That's not going to be factored into your SAI. That said, like was mentioned, make sure you do submit an appeal, talk to that school, talk to all the schools for all of the kids, and make sure you explain to them the situation, because they're going to be able to make a professional judgment around that. Some schools will, some schools might not, but it's always going to be a good position if you go ahead and write an appeal to the school and connect with the financial aid offices too to explain the situation. Yep, definitely. If you're a parent or a student, both of you sign up. Always a good situation. Link to the local scholarships. Thank you so much for linking it for me. I meant to drop it in and then I totally forgot. Is Going Mary linked to Navient? We are not, unfortunately, no. Where can we find Going Mary? It is linked, and I also dropped links in the chat. Let's see here. Can you comment on submitting a FAFSA if there is a possibility that no financial aid could be awarded due to high income or assets? It is absolutely a possibility that the schools could decide not to offer you any financial aid. When a school is considering how much aid you receive, there's a 2-step process. The first one is looking at what your financial need is and calculating that. So cost of attendance minus your SAI. The other part of that process is them looking at their budget and determining how much aid that they can award to you as a student, opposed to another student, or how much of their budget is left. So the earlier you can complete your FAFSA, the better chance you have. And if you have a financial need at the school, you have a better chance of receiving aid than if you don't have a financial need at the school. So if you receive an SAI of $20,000, and the cost of attendance is $20,000, the school is unlikely to extend you aid in that situation if they have a lot of other students that do qualify as having financial need to go to the school. But it is a possibility. If you're concerned about that, definitely talk to the school. You can ask them if they can give you more information about how they determine which students receive aid and which students don't. A lot of them will be simply a first come, first served basis. Others are going to look at a bunch of different factors, and they have a really complicated formula of how they determine that. Let's see here. If students get scholarships, does that become extra money to the student, or does it reduce the financial aid award? It shouldn't. There are exceptions to that. Like if you received, the cost of attendance was $20,000 and you received a $20,000 scholarship to go to the school, a lot of schools will have the policy that you can't be refunded financial aid from their school, if that makes sense. And so let's say they offered you a $2,000 scholarship. Once they realize you have that $20,000 scholarship, they can technically decide, okay, well, you don't have a financial need anymore, so you don't qualify. Most of them don't, but some of them do. It's kind of a complicated formula. Generally, though, that's not a situation that most families run into, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would just try and win as many scholarships as you can. That's really what the goal would be there.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I just want to add to this. I'm going to drop into the chat information. Oops, I guess the link doesn't All right, well, it's on the same, workshop list as the one you looked at today to get into the Going Merry workshop, but on Tuesday at 11 o'clock, we have a representative from Maryland Higher Education that's also going to be talking more specifically about the FAFSA and MD-CAPS and all of those things. So if you want more specific information about the FAFSA, I recommend that you also join our workshop on Tuesday at 11 o'clock.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of information coming in about the FAFSA over the next couple of months. I think their plan is to have the full application finalized by end of August. We've seen a couple of the drafts. It's not finished yet, but hopefully it's done soon. So everyone has more transparency and understanding of what's going to happen. I see a question here. Where does the scholarship money go? Like if I apply to scholarships on Going Merry, where does the money go if I win? What's going to happen in most cases is the scholarship provider is going to send it to the school once they get confirmation that your student is enrolled. Some scholarship providers will provide the check directly to you or your student, depending on who applied or whatever. But if you win a scholarship, most of the time they're going to send it directly to the school, and you'll never touch the check. But there are some exceptions to that where they will send it to you directly anyway. Some will have a thing where you have to sign a promissory note that you're going to make sure to spend that money on cost of attendance, on tuition, on books, on whatever. Some don't, but most cases they're going to send it directly to the school for you and you don't have to worry about it. Are scholarship essays similar to Common App essays? Every scholarship is going to have a different essay prompt. Sometimes you'll see kind of the same essay prompt over and over again. And in that case, you recycle that essay. But generally, you're going to find that they're going to vary depending on the scholarship. And yes, the recording is going to be provided. Let's see. I think I'm caught up. Nope, a couple more just came through. So my student could use both Naviance and Going Merry. Yeah, absolutely. There might be some overlap with scholarships, but generally, if you see one on one place, you might not see it on the other. It just depends on, I haven't seen what's on Naviance just here recently, but there is sometimes some overlap. But it doesn't hurt to apply twice if that happens by accident or anything. Thank you. Is that mostly the type of scholarship money that is on Going Merry, like the ones we don't see? I would say probably. The vast majority of scholarship providers as a whole are not going to send the check to you as a student or to your family. They're going to send it to the school directly. So I would assume that that would be true on Going Merry as well. As far as I know, it is, but I haven't looked at it specifically to figure out how that all breaks down. So I could technically be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that it would be true on every scholarship platform. Of course, yeah. All right, I'm caught up in the chat. Does anyone have any additional questions?
I have another comment for all of you because this was open to all of our Montgomery County schools, so they're not all my students. I just want to remind you that every school, every high school in Montgomery County should have a link also to local scholarships. And there are certain scholarships that are unique for your high schools. So check with your counseling department. That is where your college and career advisor usually is housed. So if you don't know who that is, either look on your website or go to counseling. But you should be able to find that information. If you can't, I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat as well. So if for some reason you are not able to find the person in your school, I can direct you to that person. Thank you so much, Bethany. You really, this is phenomenal. Thank you so much. I know that a lot of people will be watching this recording as well, and I will share a copy with you just in case you want it for any reason to see yourself on film. But I thank you so much for being here today, and I will reach out to you for something else probably in the fall.
Awesome. That sounds great. And thank you everyone for participating, for asking questions. I love it. I just dropped Going Merry's support email in the chat as well. So if anyone has any questions and you need to ask a follow-up, feel free to reach out there. They'll ping me. And if it's something which is setting up your account, they're the best ones to help out with that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.